All right, welcome to the Howard Brother Podcast. Today is our very first podcast. We'll call this 001. Today, I got my brother, Chris Howard. That's why it's called the Howard Brothers Podcast. Chris, you want to say hi?
Hey guys, how's everybody doing?
All right, so we're going to talk about why we're creating this podcast, why you and I sat down and started brainstorming the reason behind this, the passion behind it. So I'm going to let Chris dive into it first a little bit and talk about what we're trying to do with this podcast, and then we'll kind of jump into it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was one of those things where I felt seeing my journey and seeing your journey, Joe, and kind of different paths we took, but we ended up in this weird thing called personal growth, personal development. So getting to look at this from a reflective stance, right? Looking back into the past. I just remember when we were kids, we grew up together. We were a year apart, so we played many sports and everything on the same team. And I always noticed that there's just this desire to want to be the best, right? To continue to grow, to continue to move forward. But I never really knew what that was. And it was really just unaware of what we were unaware of. So looking back, it's like I always had this drive, but I just didn't know what it was. So being able to look at this podcast, it's really about helping other people out there that may not know what it is they're looking for, right? But it's all starts here with personal growth.
Yeah, very true. I was thinking about that too, is looking back to growing up. I remember sitting there thinking, you know what? I know I could do more with my life. I know it. I feel it in my gut. Like I got this sixth sense, but I just don't know what it is or how to do it or how to get there. So you guys that are watching this, some of you guys may be there where it's like, I know I can achieve more in life. I could do more. This is a podcast that you want to watch because we're going to walk through it and talk about our growth, where came from, where we're going to in the future, and the success behind it, and the things that's going to help you get, I think, light years of success faster than what we did because we had to go through and learn a lot of information. Don't you agree? We had to learn a lot of information to get us where we are today.
Absolutely, absolutely. You got to become obsessed with it in a way to really just grow. Like anything you do that you want to be good at, you have to become obsessed with wanting to do it. You know, eat, sleep, and walk, whatever it is. And being able to see that, right? It's the idea too of sharing our failures,
Yeah, oh
right?
yeah.
Because a lot of people out there think like, oh, I failed, might as well just give up, right? Or I shouldn't fail, right? Failure is nothing more than a learning lesson, and I learned that through personal growth.
That's correct. I actually welcome failure into my life because I know if I hit failure, it's because I'm pushing towards something and I've done something. And if I failed, then I actually learn from that and I keep going forward.
Yeah, it's. I heard this. I don't remember who it was. It was on like a Facebook reel, and it was a lady, a successful lady, and she said the reason why I've become so successful is because I've been okay with failure. Every day at dinner time, her dad would ask, "What did you fail at today?" Right, to make failure not a bad thing. And
Right.
I think we're everything we've done from when we were kids up to now, failure is a bad thing, right? You fail at your test, you fail at this, you fail at whatever, right? So I think that's where this personal growth, sharing our stories and growing with people is going to be powerful. So
I agree. Let's back up some time here and talk about when we were younger and let's transition to where we are today.
yeah, so I'll kind of go from when we were younger to when I went into the military and kind of shortly after that, and really when I actually found what personal growth really was. And then I'd love to hear your story because I know we have different paths, and you went did some training at one time, and I thought you were crazy when you were doing it, which we'll get into here in a bit. But so in high school, I always wanted to do more, be more sports, everything it was, and I didn't know what it was I was going after. It was just I knew there was something out there. It's just having that drive just to be better. And after high school, I went into the military, joined the Navy. And one of the biggest reasons I wanted to join the Navy was because I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. But I never even tried out. I failed, right? And that failure that we just talked about, right? We can take those failures in life, and if we don't learn from them, they become true failures. And I look at this and said, well, I didn't even try. I could consider myself a failure for the rest of my life. And I did for a very long time because I didn't even try. But I went into the military, got out, and I said, okay, I'm out of the military. I want to change my life. I'm going to build a business, right? And that's when I was into the Harley world, right? I was working on motorcycles so that I could build this business. And I learned very quickly there's more to it than just saying I want to start a business, right? Most people don't start a business because of all the things that are there. And I had a couple people that were on board with me to build this motorcycle business. And it was, well, we didn't have funding, right? We didn't have the money. We didn't have all the things that we needed to do to get started. So we all just didn't do it. So what's the best way to not become a failure? Don't even try, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's like you fail even worse. Honestly, most of us in our mind they'll think that, well, because I didn't even try, I didn't fail.
Right.
So, I ended up going back after that, back into the military world. I was back in the reserves at that time. I left the Harley world, went back to what I knew, right, working at NORAD Northcom in the intel world. And I found myself again with some change, right? This every time I changed in life, I felt some growth, but I didn't realize it was growth, and that's what I was feeling good about. Um, in 2009, actually, I went to Iraq, and when I was in Iraq is when I truly discovered personal growth. I read Tony's book, Awaken the Giant Within, and I was hooked, right? And then I started reading John Maxwell, Robert Kiyosaki, Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, Napoleon Hill, all these different authors. And my mind just exploded with all this knowledge. I was able to just get into these people and really understand. And when I first started, I really gravitated to John Maxwell because he's a very leadership, growth-oriented type of personality, and that's what he teaches.
Right.
So when I come back from Iraq, how did I put this into my life? I started realizing these 15 laws of growth that he talks about, right? Or the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And I just started putting those into action. Every day I was working. I didn't have that great of a job. It was a secure job, but I was making like 50 grand a year. And I started putting this into play. Go the extra mile, right? Make connection, connect with people, talk to people, go the extra mile and just do what's right. Be that energy, that personality. And I started doing that. And when I was out there at NORAD Northcom, I worked on computers. That was my job. So I talked to everybody. And I started doing that, going that extra mile. And it paid off. Somebody said, hey, you know these systems better than we do. We have a position opening up as a GS-12. We think you should apply. And that was like the first big kind of success for me, was going from somebody that was making 50 grand a year to making 100 grand a year. And so, it's really these different stories of being able to just put it into action. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time.
That's right. Yep. It's going to take time. Go back to, myself growing up, like Chris talked about, we took different paths, and, he's talking about being obsessed. So I was, I think Chris and I both can probably confess to this. We were kind of like that skinny kid that didn't really have much muscle mass to our bones. And, we had passions for sports, but, we're maybe not the biggest and the strongest kids. And I had a passion to grow, to make more changes to my body, get more mass on it. So I got obsessed into the fitness world and started hitting the weights. And I had times where I looked at it and realized that kids were lifting way more weights than I was that were my age, but obviously they had more muscle mass. And back then I didn't understand all that. And I looked at it as being almost like a failure, like I wasn't going to be able to do that. But for some reason, my mind's still stuck in there. So I stuck in the fitness world. I kept buying weights and putting in my parents' basements. We ended up having probably a gym in my parents' basement over time. And then as I got into my high school career, I started to get more obsessed with that. And then I started to realize how much I was fascinated by the body, which got me into becoming an EMT. So my senior year of high school, I actually started doing that. I was going to college classes during my high school career, and started to want to study anatomy more and understand medical terminology and that kind of stuff, and decided I wanted to go to school, become a doctor. That's what my kind of goal was. But there was a big turning point in my life, because after I graduated, I started to realize that chasing down people in an ambulance and trying to save their life when they're sick is not what I wanted. I wanted to help them before they got there, and that's when I got into the fitness world. So I got in the fitness world. I started into a gym in Chicago called Lifetime Fitness. It was okay, but it wasn't my best thing. I didn't have that growth mindset. I had kind of like that failure mindset, the really bad mindset, I guess I could call it. And at that point, I had to learn a lot. So I ended up having some mentors along the way who started asking me these questions about, how many books do you read? And it was such a weird question to me about how many books do I read? Like, I don't know. I don't read books. I don't even care to read books. I'd rather listen to like an audio CD or something like that, or listen to music. And he got me hooked on and listened to audiobooks, because I didn't like reading books and sitting there doing it. So I remember picking up my very first book, which was called Psycho Cybernetics, is one that he recommended. And the name of it threw me for a loop right off the bat. Psycho Cybernetics. Like, does this guy think I'm crazy or something, or what? What the book was about was the mindset that we have and how we can do anything in the world that we want. And I fell in love with this book, and still today, it's probably my most favorite book today that I've listened to probably 10,000 times because of the information in this book. And kind of give you guys a little idea of this book. Dr. Maxwell Maltz is who wrote this book, and he was a world-known surgeon. Actually, is what he was originally, and he was having patients come in who may have been in a bad car accident, and their face was completely burnt or maybe it scarred really bad, and he would do plastic surgery and make their face look like it was back before the accident. But for some reason, these individuals having 12 months or longer of being with the scars and burns, their mind about themselves changed and they started to see themselves in a whole different light. And that's when he became a psychologist and wrote this book, Psycho-Cybernetics. So it was a great turning point in my life, and that's what kind of got me into the fitness world. So I switched careers from the medical world, got in the fitness world, and the rest is history. We'll kind of go on that a little bit more here, but that's kind of where, fast forward to where I am now and where Chris was kind of at that point.
Yeah.
Chris, kind of go on, like, what was the next turning point for you?
Yeah. Another turning point for me, I was just sharing a little bit ago. I remember you called me up one day, said, "Hey, do you want to go in on this training?" I'm pretty sure it was the business mastery training, with Tony Robbins. And you said that it costs this much money, and we can. And it was like, to me at that time, it was an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah.
Right. That amount. And I'm like, dude, you're crazy. Why are you spending that kind of? You got other things you could spend money on, right?
Yep.
And it's funny because I didn't get it at that point, right? To see that you were spending that much money on some guru out there, right? And I love Tony, right? I even read my first book reading. Like, yours was like the Psycho Cybernetics. Mine was Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within.
Right.
And I'm like, that's crazy. You're spending that kind of money. You can do so much more with it. And it wasn't short. It was shortly after that I went to my first seminar, and it was one of those it was a 1 day free seminar, I think. It was a real estate one, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I remember me and my wife went to the event, and they were up there talking, telling us how we can make money in real estate. I'm like, oh, this is great. I was like, I know they're going to sell me at the end, right? They're going to sell this upgrade, and then they're going to get me to come again, and they're going to sell another upgrade. I had a very poor mindset. And something happened to me during that. Well, we ended up getting the 3 day course. It was like $199, I think, for the two of us. I didn't pay for it. I'm like, I'm not wasting my money on that crap. And it was funny because my wife ended up going to the bathroom, and while she was back there, she bought it. And I was like, you wasted our money on that. And we didn't go to the actual training for probably a year and a half or so later.
Yeah.
And I remember 3 day training. It's like, I know on the last day, they're going to try to get you, leave all credit cards at home. We're not bringing it, we're not doing this. And it was an amazing training. The first 2 days, we learned tons of stuff. I'm like, wow, this is really possible. I can do this.
Yep.
And that third day, I was like, leave nothing. We had nothing to buy anything with. And we did. We left everything at home, and we're in that training on the third day. And it was time for lunch. Something just clicked. Something clicked in my brain that says, this is what you need to do. And I ended up driving all the way home, which was probably about a 30 to 40-minute drive, just to get my cards, to drive 40 minutes back, talking on I hear people talk about this all the time. I had my credit card, raised, the amount of my credit card raised so I could buy this course. And people are like, you're stupid. Yep. I was that stupid guy, right? And I did. As I'm driving back, I'm calling, how much can I increase my credit card to? And boom, they increased it. I came back and I bought this real estate program. And it was probably one of my biggest growth moments because I invested in myself. And I think so many people overlook that investing in themselves, right? We invest in everything else out there in the world, right? All these other businesses, but you're not investing in yourself, which is technically your own business in a way, right? And whether it's your health, your wealth, your family, everything. And we tend to overlook that. So we did that. We went through these trainings, and I had a mindset that said, I spent this much money. I'm not going to tell how much. It wasn't as much as some people out there that bought bigger class packages, but I said I spent this much money. I'm going to make my money back.
Yep,
And
exactly.
real estate was one of those things that we made our money back times 10. And it's been one of the greatest things in our lives that has brought a lot of, this lifestyle that we live now. And I don't think I'm super uber successful, right? I don't flip tons of houses a year. I find what my goal is and what's important to me, and that's what we do. But we'll get into, I'm sure, that in future podcasts. But tell me more, I guess, from your going to these mentors, or kind of where you left off your story.
Yeah, so I actually started by hiring a mentor. I really have a passion to help transform lives. I knew that. But my problem is I didn't know the marketing to get people in the door. And I think that's where a lot of people that own a business struggle is they don't know marketing standpoint of it. So they have the best service. They know the knowledge, they know that kind of stuff, but they just don't know how to get people there. So imagine having the cure to cancer, but you just don't know how to get the word out to those people that you have the cure to cancer. If you think about if you're in that business right now, I mean, how would you do that when you think about it? Besides walk around, just tell people. How do you get massively amounts of people to understand what you can do, right? So I hired this mentor, and I did it after I actually picked up that book, Psycho Cybernetics, and listened to the audiobook of it. And I at that point, I made this decision like, I need to change the way I look at things because we grew up in a small town. I mean, what was our graduating class? Like 50 or something like
33.
that?
No,
You know,
33.
33, right? We had a small
33.
class. We were in a town that I'm driving down the road and looking at buildings and the houses are falling apart. Like we're in this very poverty type town in a way, I guess you can look at it. Not to talk bad about our town, right? I think it was a great stepping stone for us to look at where we were and where we come to at this point. And I actually ended up hiring this mentor. I actually went to a course that he offered one time, kind of like Chris did. And I flew to California, did a 2-day class with them. And at that point, the cost of the flight and the class and all that stuff, the hotel down there, was already pushed me way outside my comfort zone. I wasn't making a lot of money. Like I said, I didn't have clients come in like I wanted to. And I was actually putting this on a credit card. And the information I learned in that 2-day workshop transformed my life. I got back home, started applying the information right away. And within like 3 days, I had all of my stuff paid for that I just went and did. So at that point, it was like this turning point was like, oh my gosh, if I could do that, what else could I do? That was a turning point in my life. It was just that one thing that has shifted. It says, if I can do that, what else could I do? So I, kind of relate back to psychocybernetics, where it's like now my mind's seeing things differently. So then I started talking to this mentor some more and actually hired him to coach me longer. So I actually took part in his mastermind group, which was $10,000 a year back then. And I, at that point, going from doing that workshop to doing $10,000 mastermind session was absolutely crazy because my mind's still thinking like, you're insane, right? There's a part of me that has this inner critic that's saying you're crazy, you're insane, and we all have this inner critic, and that's
Yeah.
someone they talk about in psychocybernetics. And it's kind of like that stopping point. That inner critic is what stops us from taking action and moving forward. It's like I'm not good enough, or I can't
Yep.
do this. I just don't have the skills or the knowledge or whatever, right? I mean, we come up with all these things saying that, and it stops us. So I decided, what the heck, I'm going to go with it. So I did it, and again, it was like a next life changing event for me. So again, I paid off that in no time, and then went to a Tony Robbins event, which was the one that Chris was talking about earlier, which was not cheap. I mean, it was substantial, a lot more than my mentorship with my other coach, and it just kept changing my life. So I have now learned so much knowledge. That's one of the reasons why when Chris and I were sitting down about how much this has gained a transformation in our lives, that we want to share with people and help coach people if they need help with this to get through this stuff. So that's why we created this Howard Brothers podcast to kind of talk
Yeah.
about our legacy and the changes that we made and the things we learned along the way and how we can help individuals do the same thing. If you're in that place where we talked about
Yeah.
earlier,
You-
you could do more. You just
yeah.
know deep down inside, I knew that you can do more. That's what we're going to help you guys get to realize that you can do more. So
Absolutely. And just real quick on that, I mean, if you look at this and hear what you said, right? Even the coaching side, you've had mentors, you've had coaches, right? I've had mentor and coaches for the longest time. And I mean, a 10-year span after getting out of the merit, almost 10-year span, it took me to really break through this mindset, this negative impoverished mentality mindset, this victimhood mentality. And I had stories in my brain. So if you're out there listening to this and saying, well, yeah, it's easy for those guys, or it's easy, if you ever catch yourself saying it's easy for that person, you need to stop and ask yourself why you think that. Because it's that person put himself in a position to have luck, right? Labor under correct knowledge. And
Yep.
that's where it's so powerful. But think about it. I mean, you're in the coaching world within the fitness world, right? You understand that will allow you to coach really across any board because it's the mentality.
That's
Right.
right.
I'm huge in the financial side of things, right? Helping people understand their finances and money and all of that. I coached for Tony Robbins for a couple years, right? And same thing. He brought it all back to me for its psychology. Because if we
That's
can
right.
help people with the psychology of their mind, I don't care what you're trying to accomplish. I'm not as expert as fitness guy as Joe is, but I can help you because 80% of it's right here in our mind.
That's
And so
correct.
if you're out there, like you said, if you're out there thinking, I can't do this, it's because we're creatures of habit. Dr. Joe Dispenza, I don't know if you've even listened much to him, Joe, but he's a great guy out there. Um, he actually has a phenomenal story about he was in a triathlon and got hit by a car and was paralyzed. And he went through every single day, basically face down on this table, telling his body, his mind basically to heal himself. And they said he would never walk again. He walks today, right? But he's very, with the psychology side of things, is very knowledgeable. And he says we have anywhere from 70 to 90,000 thoughts per day. And 90% of those thoughts are the same that we had yesterday, which means 90% were the same as the day before, and so on.
That's
And if we
correct.
don't change that mindset today, we're not going to get where we want to be.
Let
And
me let
we
me
can't
kind of sum
change.
up a little bit
Yeah, go
about
ahead.
what Chris is kind of talking about because I think it'll help you guys see this in a different way. I like analogies. That's one thing I like, and you probably see that as you guys watch the show. As I use a lot of analogies. So imagine that your brain is like a file cabinet, okay? And Chris asked you a question. He's like, what do you think about spending $10,000 on coaching? What your brain's gonna do is walk over to this file cabinet. So play along with me. It's gonna open up this drawer, and it's gonna flip to a folder of finances, and it's going to act based on what information is currently in that folder, right? So if you don't have information that says, well, here's how I can use this knowledge I'm going to gain from this to make me more money, and instead your folder says, I don't have $10,000, your actions that you take are way different. So see, we gotta
Yep.
we gotta look at the things that we learn. We're taking and stacking these folders for success. So when we go down a path of hitting something, maybe it's an objection from a client, or maybe it's an obstacle in the road that we're trying to hit with the direction we're trying to go. What we're doing is we're gaining information in those folders that when we get there it says, oh, this isn't a big deal. Like, who cares? Like, I know a way around this, right? Because we have knowledge in there that helps us. And that's
Yeah.
where success truly happens, is that right there. So as Chris talks about this, that's what I want you to kind of think about as we go through these lessons of stuff, is you're gaining information to stack these folders for success.
Absolutely. And that same analogy, I mean, let's just break it down even a bit further, right? Because you can go into that filing cabinet, grab out that file, and you can look at it and be like, yeah, this ain't working for me anymore. It hasn't worked for me for the past 20 years or whatever many years. And you can throw it out,
That's right.
right? So, and that's what's powerful about analogies, is because if we can make something disappear so easy in an analogy, we can do it in our own life, right? And that's the power of the mind, and getting to understand these 70,000 to 90,000 thoughts, right? If we want to change, we have to change.
That's right.
We can't wake up the same way every single day. If it hasn't been working for us, I should say, we can't wake up the same way, right? If your routine is waking up, hitting the snooze, rolling over, grabbing your phone, playing a few minutes on social media, and then putting that down, walking, and you have no energy. If you're doing that every day, you're going to get more of that.
That's right.
And so that's where this personal growth mindset comes into play, and how to develop it. It starts with the smallest change,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it's just listening to one powerful audio in the morning, or a podcast, or whatever it is, right? What are those things that will take you from seeing things in life as bad, like the failures, to start to see them as successes?
That's correct. Yep. So let's do this, Chris. We got a few minutes here. We're going to kind of wrap this up. So we're going to try to keep these podcasts maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes in length, because we want you guys to take the time to watch these. Matter of fact, if you are watching
Actually,
this,
listen to them.
yeah, listen to them, right? we're going to be putting this on a podcast for audio. This is right now, if you guys are watching this, you'll probably watch this on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. We have Instagrams. So you guys can go there and watch these if you want. But what I want you to think about is this, okay? When you guys are when you're watching this stuff or you're listening to it, you guys can take and break this into sections, right? Like I always do this with podcasts. I want to share this with you. If I haven't listened to a podcast or I'm listening to an audiobook, I'll go ahead and play it and listen to it. And then if it's not, for example, like on my iPhone, I'll actually screen capture where I ended the last section I was listening to, the timeline of it. And then I can come back and fast forward it to that and keep listening to it. So I would highly recommend you do that. And then use something called no extra time, which I think I originally heard from Tony Robbins, I think. And that's where you're trying to use time that's kind of wasted. It's not purposeful, right? Like me driving to my gym is not purposeful time driving there. That time driving to the gym is, even though it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, to me is like a waste of time, right? So that's a time to listen to audiobooks or podcasts, that kind of stuff. So I'll turn them on and that's when I listen to it. And then I'm filling my mind with knowledge during that trip that now makes it purposeful, right? So you guys can do that, okay? But Chris, can you share, right behind you, you got your Veterans Breakthrough logo. Can you talk about, kind of where you're at today? Like, what do you do? And, and I guess share that idea with those. What do you do now? And,
Yeah.
The success you have so far.
One real quick thing on the net time. I do dishes. I hate doing dishes. I listen to some type of audio personal growth during dishes. It makes the time valuable. And to all the men out there, right? If they want to win some points with the ladies. No.
Yeah, it's kind of like doing a treadmill. If you don't like doing the treadmill, you can watch some podcasts or something like that too.
Right. Exactly. So Veterans Breakthrough, what really for me, my transition in the military, and I shared almost a decade of my life. I feel like I didn't live purposefully. I don't want to say I wasted it, right? Because I don't think anything's truly a waste if we learn from it. But I didn't live it as purposely as I could have. There's more I could have done. Even when I was doing really good in real estate, there were still other areas of my life that needed work, and I was avoiding them. So Veterans Breakthrough is really that for veterans. It's taking the personal development world and bringing it to the veteran world to help them understand, right? There's many things that we can become really good at, right? But if we're avoiding those things that we're not so good at, let's say it's relationships, maybe it's our health, and we're just avoiding those things, and we have these emotions that come into life, right? And then this is a podcast about, right, being men, right? Alpha men, let's be men. So we have to understand, to be men too, we have to understand those emotions and how to work through them, because if we're just burying them, it's eventually going to come up and boil up, right? And we see this happen a lot, and not just in the veteran world, but that's where my heart is, because that's where a lot of my struggles came from. And so it's really about coaching these veterans to realize they have the power within them already. So they just need that little tool or that little tweak, whatever it may be, right? Hopefully you're getting it from one of these podcasts that will just allow you to make that little bit of a change to go to the next level. And that's what growth is truly about.
That's right.
About being better than you were the day before.
That's right. Yeah. So, looking at myself, you guys see this is my podcast room. I actually put up a permanent podcast room for this. And behind this wall behind me, you may actually hear them out there working out too. Sometimes they're dropping weights and stuff like that. And you kind of hear a little bit echo through the walls. But I have a 7,000 square foot gym, and that's something that way back in the day when I was working out, it was always a dream of mine. As a matter of fact, I can still remember today when I had this weight room down in my parents' basement. I was trying to get my dad to work out with me, and his thing is waiting to get to my age and see what kind of shape you're in and that kind of stuff. And I had suggestions then about that I really wanted to get into fitness and I wanted to do this. And it was kind of like, they never really experienced that success, like that growth, like sometimes like we all want, and they don't think it's possible. And unfortunately it was kind of casted down in a way. It was like, I don't know if it's even possible to do that type thing. So, it was one of those hindering factors behind my success that was always constantly in the back of my mind. I remember when I first moved to Chicago, I was always thinking like, what if this doesn't work out and then I have to go back home? Like, because it was in my mind, right? It was one of those things that was put in a folder that I kept going back to when I thought about that. So I had to erase that, get rid of it, and then move into a new way of thinking. And that's what kept me going with this gym. But anyways, I have a 7,000 square foot gym. This is what I dreamed of my whole entire life to get to. I'm here, and now I'm just continually growing to get to the success that I want. And again, that's one of the reasons why we're sharing this podcast, is talk about this growth, the changes, the things that we learned along the journey. And you'll see why we keep setting goals, because that's a big factor with growth, is to keep setting these goals. Because, if you're not changing, you're dying. That's the truth behind it. And that's where we're constantly changing and growing to make the changes with this. So anything else, Chris, that you want to finish up today?
No, I think you hit it right there on the head, right? Is knowing that, those before you gave you the best lifestyle they could possibly do with what they knew, right? I
That's
don't
right.
take away from anybody that got me to where I was, right? But I'm in control now, and I'm the only one that can determine my life. And so that being said, don't put an excuse on somebody else. Well, my parents didn't teach me that. Our parents didn't teach us a lot of things, and I hold nothing of that against them. But they just were doing the best they could with what they were taught from
That's right.
their
Yep.
parents. And that's that generational legacy, that generational wealth that we're talking about passing down. Because if we can get this out there more and just impact one person, that's going to eventually impact two people, three people. It's going to multiply. The power of threes, we hear it. So that's what it really is. That's what we're here for. And we're hoping to make some amazing podcasts and make some great friends.
That's correct. So stay tuned for our next podcast. We're going to get into a lot of great information that's going to help you out. But we're going to talk about, how to align your passion with your purpose in life. And we're going to give you some tips that's going to help you guys pursue your passion, your own passion, to move down a road of success, to get the results that you want. So stay tuned for our next podcast session. And we are looking forward to really sharing some great information. Anything you want to add, Chris, before you finish up today?
Let's do it.
Thanks for tuning into the Howard Brothers Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends and colleagues. You can also follow us on social media to stay up to date with new episodes and behind-the-scenes content. Remember, it's never too late to start building your legacy. Keep listening, keep growing, and let's make an impact together.